Hi, welcome back to this course on serverless architectures and best practices. This is section 7 and we are going to discuss use cases and example of serverless architectures that you can find in everyday life. In particular, we are going to discuss about REST endpoint and REST abstraction and how you can achieve that with serverless. As you probably already know at this point, that it's super easy to implement serverless REST endpoint. Then we will move forward another abstraction, which is CQRS, and we'll discuss deeply which are the benefits that CQRS brings to the discussion. First of all, let's start talking about REST endpoint. In this video, we are not going repeat again how you can build a REST endpoint with serverless, because we have discussed that a lot in the previous sections. But we are going to discuss about the mental model behind REST resource modeling and which are REST endpoints leveraging a given mental model and which kind of projects use them, involve them, and fits well with them. So the first point to abstract when dealing with REST services is about what is the model behind the architecture. Because architectures come into mind when we model a system, so they are strictly related to the system that we want to model, but also to the experience and the abstraction that we have in our mind. The simplest model is thinking about a resource as an object that we can create, that we can delete, that we can update. So the simple model is the create, update, and delete of a given resource. And REST serverless, but at the end, any kind of REST endpoint models over this abstraction, over this idea of having a remote resource and a set of operations to manipulate that resource. But it is not the only model, it's just the simplest model. This is a point that I want to stress out, because thinking everything as something that you can model with REST abstraction, with REST resources, is really naive, and we don't want to do that. We want to choose the best abstraction, the best pattern, the best architecture for every use case. Talking about modeling the CRUD is behavior in which data is modeled as a resource, so something you have to manipulate, and endpoints maps to actions performed over resources. This is super important because an endpoint and an HTTP verb compose made an action to be applied to a resource. Recent years, but not so recent, pretty most since the beginning, we had to extend this model, to stress this model, to include even the operation of data retrieval and data selection or data querying. This means that we had to extend the CRUD model to select, but things start not working very well. They start presenting issues that you can ignore, but when things get more complicated, these issues become really relevant. So basic CRUD just only have retrieval or select, create, update, and delete, but our select operation is much more complex. That's the one that can be provided by the single resources retrieval by calling the get verb on, say, a resource, for example, a /book, because we can have complex logic operation, and if we need to match different entities, we need to deal with different entities, issues tend to arise. Just let me explain to clarify the concept. Think about modeling a query. There is not a clear way in this model to represent a query. You can use a set of parameters, of optional parameters on the get operation. Say you overload the get books command, attaching params and values for your program. But on the other side, you could also, when things get more and more complicated and get operations not suitable, is not feasible, think about having an endpoint to compare two different books. So I send you a book, and in my query, I ask you to give me a similar book to the one that I've just sent to you. If I have to send data, get operation is not the best way, so we'll opt for a dedicated endpoint with get post method. This can be an idea and it solves the problem that we've seen before, but it requires you to violate the model of resources represented as software object, because in this endpoint, which is book/query, query is not an entity, is not an object, is just an handler. So you can just feel that things are not matching very well and something needs to be done. But this architecture, the standard CRUD, is the most used abstraction. So we do not have to throw that away only because it fits bad in a number of use cases, because ticketing systems, e-commerce, CMS, ERP, CRM, etc., and many other use cases, pretty much every use case that you have found so far can be or has been representing using CRUD operation. But we need to also to do some consideration, because the REST modeling is great when actions on the object, on the resource are simple. And also when the resources need to be stored and retrieved, and the model of management of the resources is just I put something there, I retrieve this object, I change it, then I update, then I delete, and so on. It's great for managing data when an action impacts only one resource. When you have an action, when you put an object but it has side effects that needs to change other resources, things doesn't go very well. And finally, the sense of the discourse that focused the objective of this talk is that we have other mental models and we can figure out if they are a good option or not.